Hello guys. We had a couple of more questions from one of the previous sections, section 4.1, the inverse functions. So one of the students had a couple of questions. I'm going to go ahead and work a couple of problems on finding how to find the inverse of a function. So this is section 4.1. So I'm going to start with, so before I actually do problems, I believe she wants to see 64, 68, and 69. But before I do these problems, I'm going to go ahead and real quick go through the 4 steps, because to find the inverse of any function, it doesn't matter what the function is, you have to follow 4 steps to be able to find the inverse. So I'm just going to go ahead and quickly write them for you on the board. So make a note of them, and then I'm going to go ahead and start with the first problem where we're going to use these 4 steps to find the inverse. Okay, so let me just write the steps. So to find the inverse of the function f of x, we need to use the following steps. Okay? And this is for any function. So anytime somebody gives you a function and they ask you to find its inverse, all you have to do is follow these 4 steps and you will find the inverse. Okay? Let me just write the notation for f inverse of x. So as you know, if the function is called f of x, then its inverse we denote by, I'm just going to put it, actually we'll see at the very end. I'll write it again at the very end. Okay? So this is going to be f and then with a negative on top of the f, which of course doesn't mean exponent, it's just negative 1. I'm sorry. Negative 1, which doesn't mean, of course, is negative exponent negative 1. It just means the inverse. But anyway, we'll write that. So step 1, you have to change f of x to y. Okay, so anytime somebody gives you a function f of x and you want to find the inverse of the function, the first step is to change f of x to y, which, as you know, of sure by now, y and f of x always represent the same thing anyway. But this time you physically have to interchange them. Step 2, you're going to actually interchange x and y. Okay, so of course, as you know, what that means is once you change f of x to y, so now you have, of course, y and x in your equation. So now step 2 says to actually interchange them. So make all the x's y and all the y's x's. So you're just going to interchange x and y. And then step 3. By the way, step 3 is where you do most of your actual computation or work or labor, or which is not really much of a labor, of course, for some function, but this is where you do most of your work. The step 1, 2, and the step 4 are pretty quick steps. But step 3 is where you do most of your work. Anyway, step 3 says to solve for y. Okay, so in step 2, you interchange x and y. So now you're going to go take that equation, new equation, after you interchange x and y. Then you're going to solve that equation for y, which means you're going to isolate the y and, of course, everything else on the other side. So actually, by the time you solve for y, which means you complete your step 3, you already found the inverse, except you just have to rename your y that you just found as what we're looking for, which is f inverse of x. So we're just going to say also change the last step, step number 4, change y to f inverse of x. Again, don't forget that negative 1 just is a notation for inverse, so it's not an exponent. It looks like an exponent, but it's just a notation for inverse, f inverse. So you can read that as f inverse of x or inverse of f of x. So either f inverse or inverse of f. But never even read the negative 1 or say negative 1. Okay, anyway, so there they are. These are the 4 steps. With these 4 steps, you should be able to find inverse of any function, okay? So looks like I got 4 minutes on this video here so far. I don't know. I'm going to Let me see if I can try to go ahead and actually apply the 4 steps. I'm going to number the 4 steps on my first problem. For problem number 64, I'm going to number the steps, but you don't really have to number them when you find the inverse. Just make sure you learn the steps so you can apply them. So whether you want to number them or not, you can if you want to, but you don't have to, okay? So these are the steps. So this is what you have to always go through. So let me take them off, and then